Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And as additional guests come in, I will go ahead and let them in. So you may hear a little clicking sound. That's me when I have to forward the slide. So I always just like to put that out there because sometimes people are like, I'm hearing this, distracting noise. So I apologize in advance. Today's webinar is called Stressed Out, Spotlight on Student Mental Health. And this workshop, or in today's case, webinar version, was created with the partnership of a high school, a large regional high school that had seen quite a large increase in the number of referrals they were receiving this year for student mental health issues. And so we partnered and came up with some issues that we thought would be really impacting students and decided to put together this workshop for them. And now we made it into the teacher version. So what are the things that you as teachers, as guidance counselors, as administrators, as SEL support teachers, what are those kinds of things that you should be looking for? And what are some strategies that you can share directly with students and or families to support their students? Okay, so we are going to make this as interactive as possible. My name is Michelle Regan. I will be stopping at points here and there to ask for your thoughts. I'm going to offer you to either unmute or you can put your answers in chat. And this way we can sort of explore the very unique issues that you're having at your individual schools. Okay, so we want to start with this idea of why are you here? I think it's really important that we understand what everybody wants to get out of this. So I have my little Zoom poll. If you could click the area that kind of drew you to this workshop. When you heard the title, what drew you to come today? Okay, so it looks like you are here to learn about how to deal with student stress and how to deal with your own stress. And that's really what we heard when we did this workshop with the partner school. We found that the teachers that attended, the various adults in the building that attended, got just as much out of the strategies and the discussion about how our brain works and how our brain and body handle stress. They got just as much out of it as the students. And so that's why we really wanted to offer this as a webinar for staff members, because we felt like this is just as critical for you to make sure that you are dealing with your own stress. Okay, so we know that about 50% of teens, high school students and some middle school preteens say that they're more stressed this year than last year. And that seems like common sense. When talking to the students that I worked with, they absolutely verified that that's how they're feeling. And in fact, I think I could honestly say that more than 50% of the groups that I've worked with said that they are more stressed than last year. And that's important for a couple of reasons. So first things we want to look at are what the normal stresses are that teens experience. And so typical stressors such as expectations and school demands. So these might be coming from family members. These might be coming from teachers, from guidance counselors, especially as teenagers start to plan for college. Friends and relationships. We know that these ebb and flow in terms of being positive or being stressful. And so normally teens are going to be experiencing stress around that. And then lastly, family issues. And in my discussion with teens, I was very surprised how many students rated this as their number one issue. So that brings us to what is specific or unique to our current situation that would be causing more stress to students. Okay, and so what I'd like you to do is you can, instead of using the Padlet, since we have such a small group, we can use the chat feature. But I would love for you to identify with the teenagers that you work with, what is it that you think they are the most stressed out about right now during this pandemic? And this can be over the past year. You can consider, how they've hopefully changed and evolved over the year, but what are the stressors that you see teens facing now? So take a moment and feel free to put that in the chat. Or you can unmute. If you'd like to unmute, you can certainly share. Here we go. Okay, not seeing their friends. I'm going to start with that one. I think that's probably the biggest one. And when I discuss that with teenagers, what I tried to share with them is that that is so natural because it's so important that we know that brain development and the research around brain development tells us that that social aspect of students seeing their friends really is what is supposed to happen during these years between like 12 and 18 plus. Okay, so knowing that and the fact that they don't have that opportunity, it's really like a part of their brain is kind of sending them the signal that that's something that they're missing out on. Okay, and then certainly having just trouble adjusting to remote learning. This is absolutely one of the top things that I hear. And I'm going to share with you what the teens identified as their top stressors, because this way I don't have to summarize, I can share with you. Okay, so when I did this workshop recently, these were the things that teens identified, and I'm going to give you a minute to read these. So by looking at this list or this wallboard of ideas, online school and homework and expectations, keeping up with schoolwork, getting good grades, keeping track. So that's a huge one for students because they're struggling with these things that normally they have a support system. So, typically our teenagers, any stressors that they feel around school, they have that support system of their peers. They also have the support system of the teachers and the trusted adults that are in the building. And both of those things are missing at that point. And so this becomes even more intensified. And so when I ask students that, well, you had stress before, right, about homework, and you had stress before about getting good grades, they all reported that while some of the stressors are similar, that they're much more intense during the pandemic. And I think, as we said, they are, we've identified the reasons is they lack the socialization, and they also lack that safety and structure that school provides. Okay. So if I asked, and you can either give me a thumbs up or you can respond, does this ring true? Does this make sense to you when you see this list that that students identified? Does that make sense? You can certainly use the reactions if you like. Okay. I think that, it kind of hit exactly to what you shared, Angela. And I think it's really resonant of what I'm hearing from other teachers, parents, staff members, that it really matches up to what students are saying themselves. Okay, so why is this important to know? What I want us to know and what I want students to know is, what do those stressful emotions do? The constant stress that we're feeling. So we know that it impacts attention, memory, and learning. And this is important for students to understand, so that when they're feeling distracted or when they're feeling like, I just read a whole chapter and I don't get it, or if they can't, like I said, we can't remember, they need to understand that the constant stress that they're feeling is causing some of these things to happen. Okay, academic performance, the two go hand in hand. The ability to form and maintain positive relationships. If kids are feeling stressed out by their parents, stressed out by their siblings, this certainly makes sense. It's also going to impact their ability to make and maintain friendships. I've heard lots of teens say things like, I just don't have the energy to keep texting or FaceTiming all these different people. And it's just much easier to kind of let things go by the wayside. Okay. Mental and physical well-being. Kids probably did not feel this at the start, but by now they're certainly reporting feeling exhausted, or I'm hearing things like, I feel like I hit a wall. And it's not just mental, it's also physical. Their whole routine has changed. Now it's spring, so that's good, and they're going to get outside more, but even kids' physical activity has decreased, and all of these things impact one another. Decision making. So this is a big one as we talk about time management for students and kind of juggling all the different work that they have. The fact that stress impacts decision making really impacts students' ability to get started, right? So I have my agenda, I've written down the 6 different items for homework that I have tonight, and I don't know where to start. Okay. And so we've seen that a lot. We've seen that come up for students, that they just don't know where to begin. And so what do? They avoid. Okay. And lastly, creativity. I like to put this one last because this can really be something that we can use in our favor to invite kids back to feeling good about themselves, if they can tap back into their creativity. Okay. All right. So Angela, please stop me as we go if there's things that come up or if you want to share, and we will keep moving. Okay. So those are all the different outcomes or impacts that stress has. But what about the idea that it's chronic? What about the idea that this excessive stress response has become the norm? Okay. That being said, it causes, if you think about it with this analogy of the car, that causes wear and tear on your brain and body. So picture that toxic stress as if it were revving a car's engine for days or weeks at a time. Okay. That kind of wear and tear on your car could be catastrophic. And the same is true of our own brain and body. And so we really need to think about it in terms of what are the short-term impacts? How do I feel today? And what are the long-term impacts? How do I feel now in April 2021, knowing this has been going on for over a year? Okay. So the question I ask to students and teachers alike is, are you just surviving? You know, as I said earlier, many people report that they're feeling like they hit a wall. They're feeling tapped out. So we think about the idea of surviving versus thriving. Okay. What is it that we need to do to move from surviving to thriving? All right, so let's look at this idea of being in the present. We know, the research tells us that using strategies such as mindfulness, and there's lots of strategies that we're going to talk about today, help us to be in the present. And when we're in the present, we are the happiest, we are the most content. But what about this pandemic and what's happened? Well, if we look at what's happened, is there were so many things that we were expecting to happen that didn't, things that we lost, that we spend an awful lot of time focused on the past. So I always use the example of my own son, who is a freshman in college. And so last year he was a senior. So he lost graduation, he lost prom, he lost his sports season. He lost even all of the college planning because we didn't know if he was going to actually go away until very close to September. So all of those things that have been lost, as educators, first of all, we need to look to ourselves and see, are we dealing with this? Are we still focused on the past and what's been lost? But we also have to help students figure out, how can we go through those stages of grief? How can we be sad, be mad, accept that those things have been lost? So it's truly going through those grief stages to be able to say, I'm going to put the past in the past behind me and focus more on the present. Okay. The same goes for the future. I think back to last March and I think about how the future was so unknown. It's definitely gotten better, but there's still that unpredictability and the fear of the unknown that causes us to spend so much time focusing on the future. And that being said, that creates the worry, that creates the anxiety and stress. When I talk to students about this, they bring up, especially those that are college planning, they don't know how this whole thing is going to impact their ability to get into college. They don't know if they're going to be able to go away to college. So these things just sort of hang over our heads, and they're ever present, and we never get a break from them. So again, we want to do some really strategic thinking about how we can look at the future and how we can step back and try to be in the present. Okay, so as we move forward, we're going to be looking at the strategies to keep us in the present through mindfulness and some very specific stress reduction types of strategies. Okay, so what's stressing you out? And I asked this to the adults and teens. Has there been times during this pandemic that you have been more focused on the past or more focused on the future than you have in the present? Okay, and Angela, thank you so much for sharing. You said most people that you talk to are surviving, taking it one day at a time. Absolutely. So if you think about yourself or even any of the students that you work with, would you say that this rings true in terms of being focused on things that have been lost in the past, or being focused on the fear of the unknown and what's coming in the future? While you're thinking about that, I just want to say welcome to Madeline. We're glad to have you today. We have a small group, but we invite you to use the unmute, and you can answer that way and discuss, or you can use the chat feature.
Okay.
Okay, welcome. And what we were
Hi.
I'm so glad to have you. What we were just talking about was people's difficulty with sort of hanging out in the present. So I'm just going to show you real quick that slide, because I think it does help us visualize as we go forward. So many people have been stuck over here on the left, grieving what's been lost. And I did not even raise, people who have actually lost loved ones, people who have lost jobs, people who have experienced those kinds of personal losses. I mostly have been thinking about it from a students' point of view, where they may have lost those important things during the teenage years. Also, this idea of being worried about the unknown. So the idea here is that we really want to try to help ourselves and our students move closer to being in the present.
Right. Can you see me?
I cannot. I see like a black, it almost looks like a shadow.
That's so weird. I just got a new desktop yesterday in my office, and now I'm still trying to, set everything up. Set everything up. Okay. I think I'm gonna join on my Chromebook.
And I'm really glad that you unmuted to actually hear your voice. So if you have thoughts or you want to respond, please feel free.
Well, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Madeline Jean Mary. I work for Hope Academy Charter School in Asbury Park.
Okay, great.
And I'm the school social worker. So I'm gonna get on here.
Okay.
I'm gonna use another device just so that you can see me.
Perfect.
Yes.
Sounds good. Okay, so while we're waiting for Madeline to do that, Angela, you had said both. You think that there has been both people who are either way, they're not focused on the present. Am I paraphrasing you right?
Yes, I'm reading the question again to make sure I got it right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, take your time.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? It sounds like in your response, you said both.
Right.
There have been times when you've been very focused on the past and other times when you've been focused on the future.
Right. That's okay. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what I hear from most people, that they really fluctuate between the two. And the hardest part is staying in the present. And so that's what we really want to try to focus on. And I think one important thing through all of this with our students is explaining this to them, because they realize, oh, maybe this is why I'm feeling, I'm going to use the words, not like myself, that they can start to try to do those things. They're much more motivated to start doing some of these practices. There you are. Hi, now you're muted then.
Hi, okay, I'm here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So what we were just saying is that students have been reporting feeling, and I think many adults, feeling like, I don't feel like myself. I don't have the motivation I used to have, all of those kinds of things. And so what I was just saying to Angela is that if we can get them to see that if we do these strategies that help us sort of stay in the present and focus less on the past and less on the future,
Right.
they're going to have much more a sense of agency around their lives, a sense of less frustration. So that's what we want to focus on.
Right. So unfortunately, here at my school, we've had a few instances where we've had some girls who have tried to harm themselves. So that, that's what's been going on, especially it was the beginning of this year that was really tough for a lot of the girls here in the 8th grade.
Okay.
Specifically, all 3 of them, well, 2 of them were in the 8th grade and 1 of them was in the 7th grade.
Okay.
So all the same.
Yeah, I mean, I started this out today by saying that the reason we even created this and a couple other workshops is we had a couple of high schools reach out to us and say, hey, we have a lot more referrals, mental health referrals, and they were interested in having us present this type of thing to the students.
Okay.
So we've been doing, we've started partnering with schools and presenting it to the students themselves.
Nice.
We've gotten such a great response because I think in the beginning, my theory in the beginning is we were so stressed out that nobody really wanted to talk students through the bad stuff, right? Because it was pretty much all bad. And so, when I presented some of the questions that I would ask students, teachers would say, oh, well, I don't really want to go there. I don't really want to ask them if their parents lost jobs, or I don't want to really ask them if they've lost anybody. And what I was, making clear to them is they need to be able to process this.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to go through the bad to come out the other side.
Right.
And so we've seen a lot of really, really strong feedback from the students themselves.
Okay.
So that's exciting because nobody wants to feel like they're not themselves, right? It's just a horrible feeling. So I share this quote because I feel like this whole idea, we want to get out of survival mode and we want to start thriving. So in order to do that, we need some new habits.
Yes.
Okay. And I really want students to know, and teachers alike, that it's not going to look the same for everybody. So the strategies that I provide, some will work, some will not work for you. You'll have no interest in them, and that's okay. It's really about what makes sense for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we start with this. Think about when your computer doesn't work. You unplug it.
Then if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about it that way, the strategies I really want students to think about is how to get away from these devices, because they're on a device all day doing school.
Yeah.
If their school offers extracurriculars via Zoom, more time they're spending on the device. If they are reaching out to friends, which I don't want them to disconnect from friends, but it's all about these devices.
Yeah.
So I ask them to commit to as many days in the week as they can to just unplug for 15 minutes.
Right.
And it will feel long in the beginning. And I tell them that in the beginning, you might want to try it twice in a week. And then the next week, maybe more, because I guarantee you're going to actually appreciate how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, not everybody likes to sit still, and that's okay. So we encourage a couple of different things. So I'm going to start with the first top right-hand corner. Move. Get up and move. I don't care what it is. Is it a walk around your house? Is it walking up and down your steps? I was saying I have a son who's a junior in high school. I make him, in between classes, walk downstairs. I don't care that he's tired. Walk downstairs and get a snack, a glass of water, come downstairs and talk to me for a minute, because he used to go to this big campus where he walked around from class to class.
Right.
Not able to do that anymore.
Oh.
The movement can look like whatever students identify, but it's really important to try to put that back into your life. You can take piggyback that with getting nature. So I say to the students, if you want to move and you can get outside, that's even better. But if you can't, you can open the window. You can have, what do you call a screensaver or pictures of nature in your space, in your learning space. You can have sounds of nature.
Right.
Bottom line is, what is important for all of us to know, but especially students, is it's about the perception that the brain has. If the brain has a sense of nature brings me peace, even if it's you looking at a screensaver or looking at a poster on your wall or hearing the sounds of nature, it'll still start those positive chemicals releasing in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody lives near a park, but that's okay. There are other ways to engage with nature. Okay. Breathe. So this is the one thing that many students who have not yet been exposed to mindfulness practices feel a little cautious about trying anything around breath work.
Right.
What I say to students is, you can, I always ask them, how many of you get anxious, and the hands go up. This is an immediate way to address anxiety. And I share with students a couple of different strategies. Let me just see. I think I have it on this page for you. Nope. Okay. It's in the handout. We have a couple of different simple strategies that we do. One is as simple as counting your breaths, because what happens is, as you're doing it, you're forcing your brain to stop thinking about that thing that's worrying you.
Yeah.
And you engage that part of your brain that looks at that helps control the parasympathetic nerves. So you immediately start to calm down when you can control your breathing. So counting breaths. The other one is listening to your breath. So you breathe in through your nose, and when you breathe out through your mouth, you can make any loud sound that you want, but it is forcing yourself to listen to your breathing.
Right.
Do it in yoga, even in regular exercise. The breath is super important. And if you want to try to get fun with it, if you're going to integrate this into classrooms, you want students to try to plan it around transitions. We encourage one activity where you walk backwards, and every step you take, you do an inhale and an exhale. So the idea is, it's very quick. You might start on one side of your bedroom in between classes and end up 6 breaths on the other side. But again, your brain is forced by thinking about the movement and thinking about the breathing. It immediately calms your parasympathetic nerves. Okay. So I always try to start small, try to start very doable, so that if kids are put off by something, they're not going to feel embarrassed or stressed out or any of those things. When it comes to the educators, most are pretty willing to try this. And so what I always say to them is, I share 3 ideas, you pick one. You don't have to do exactly what I'm telling you to do. Tweak it, change it, make it work for you. Okay. This next idea called Picture It, it directly relates to that idea of being so focused on the unknown. So we say to ourselves and to our students, how do you want to emerge from this pandemic?
Right.
Imagine yourself being, I don't know, the same, different. What would that be like? So we have 3 ideas for our 3 different types, or our many different types of students. One, for those students who like to get hands-on and who like to be creative, create a collage, cut pictures out of a magazine, put the different adjectives that describe you, put the verbs of things you want to try. For those students that like to write, have them write a letter to the future selves. Okay, think about, what might I want to try? How might I want to be different when this is all over? And then lastly, for those kids that want to do the least amount, and that's totally okay, just do bullet points. Say to them, I want you to put at least 3 or 4 bullets of how you want to emerge from this pandemic. You don't have to tell them they have to be different. They certainly don't have to be different. Maybe for kids who just totally want to be themselves, but feeling better, maybe they can put things on here like, try some of these strategies. Okay. But the idea is to try to make that future focus be positive. instead of stressful? Okay. I already realized we're at the 30-minute mark, so I want to make sure we keep moving, but please, again, ask questions or share ideas. So take a minute to read this. I think more than ever now, we realize that this pandemic has caused a lot of isolation. And Madeline, you mentioned those 3 students. Certainly, students are feeling like they're not really sure where to turn. And so we really want to stress for them the need to connect. And so I have these 4 thoughts. So the first one is, where is your community? And I think this is particularly important for kids that maybe, let's say, they were starting high school or they were starting middle school and they never even got to meet their peers before the school year started. We want them to identify where it is that they have connections. So they start with their home. Who is in their home? Who are they connected to outside of their home? That's extended family. Who are they connected to within their community? Are they engaged in churches or temples? Are they engaged in community service? Other sorts of things, community sports, other kinds of community civic engagement, okay? We want them, and I always say to them, map it out, put it on a piece of paper and start identifying, put yourself in the center and start drawing out little lines to the places you're connected. Maybe you have good friends and you're friends with their families, their parents, okay? What I say to students is, if you start creating your little community sketch and you see it's lacking, that's indicative of us needing to do something about it. It's really, really important that we create a community. And at schools, we're very good at doing that, right? We try to create community for kids. But in this instance, we want to encourage them to be the community builders, okay? So I say to students, for my own son, I mentioned he was a junior in high school. He lost out on a lot of things, sports and things like that. I got him hooked up with a community service organization. I didn't even ask him. I just signed him up. And he really likes it. And so now, even though sports is starting, he's going to continue with the community service organization. So it is that we have to either put ourselves out there or connect with the community we already have. Okay. This one, in real life, IRL for students, what I think about that is, specifically in this time right now where we're starting to open up a little bit, we want to think about safe ways that maybe we can start to do some things with either peers, family members. We want to think about what's safe, safety first, but what are ways that we can get some sense of being connected to what we used to do? So it might be, for my older son who's in college, they call it their pod. If you have a group of friends that you see regularly, that's a safer group than just getting together with anybody and, having a party with 30 kids. But what are the things you can do? Maybe you can go to the basketball courts. Maybe you can go to play mini golf somewhere. But the idea is just starting to reconnect to real, actual, authentic social activities. Okay. And what I usually have them do is they'll brainstorm. Yes, I could possibly, when I do this with students, studying, instead of studying over FaceTime, maybe you could meet outside at the park where there's a picnic table. Maybe we could meet at the library where there's space that's, safe and distant. Okay. So now that we've talked about those two, I want to share these 2 activities with you. I love this activity. You can do it yourself or you can do it with your students. Who's got your back? Ask them to complete these sentences. I'll give you a minute to read. Okay. The hope is that every student will be able to answer all 5. If there is any concern that somebody has blanks, that they were not able to complete this is where we as educators, as counselors, need to step up. And we want to make sure that students understand that the last 3, let's just say, there are trusted adults at their school that can fill these roles. They can help you solve problems. They can help you feel valued. They can help listen to and take your concerns seriously. It's super important for kids to feel like there is someone safe and trusted. Okay, so what I usually do with this activity is I ask them to fill it out in private. And then if I was doing a group session with students, I would ask them to private chat me and let me know if they haven't completed all 5. Now, guess what? It can be the same person. This could be mom or dad. This could be grandma. This could be a sibling. It could be a friend. And it could be all 5. And that's okay. But we certainly don't want them to go away with blanks. Okay. And that's an important thing to convey.
Are you able to send that to me?
This is in the handout. So I'm going to send the handout after today.
Okay.
So I'm just going to ask the 2 of you, do you think most of your students would be able to fill out all 5 and feel like there are trusted adults at your school who could be the actual answer that they write down?
I would say yes.
Yes, I would say yes too. And I also put in the chat, this is a great activity too. We've been working with our adults, also our teachers and staff. It's a great staff activity as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because here's what I tell the adults specifically. And no, sorry, Angela, I didn't see that you put that in chat. Is if I go back to it for a second, I say to adults, put down at least one person in your building. Okay. In your school building or your school,
Yeah.
if you're not back in the building. Because then at the end of the session, I want them to commit to be in touch with somebody from that building. It's so important that everything that we do, that we feel like we have somebody. And teachers feel so isolated and so stressed and overwhelmed. So this is a great activity. And if you can add the caveat, you could even add another question if you feel like they wouldn't put somebody down. But for that middle question, people who help me to solve problems, there should be one person in your building that could help them with that. So yeah, I do think it's a great activity for staff. So your BFF, I ask you to think about your favorite person. What words would you use to describe? What comes to mind? You could stick it in chat or you could say it out loud when you think about your favorite person.
I would say positive, someone who's positive.
Positive,
Mhm.
loyal, genuine, good listener, funny. Okay. Everybody is going to use positive words for your favorite person. But what about yourself? I want you to now think about that you're your own BFF. And I want you to choose 3 words to describe you. But just like you did for your favorite person, these all have to be positive words. All right. What would you put down about yourself to describe yourself? Great. Encouraging, loving, caring, genuine. Come on, Angela. What 3 words would you use to describe yourself? There we
Trying to make sure I was spelling listener right. I think I got it right. It's kind of hard for me to see,
did.
being on the computer all day.
I know.
Everything is virtual.
I know it.
Yeah.
Trusting, caring, and listener. Okay, so this is so important. We underestimate how important it is to hear positive feedback. And we need to not only positive feedback, meaning from others, but from ourselves. Think about that voice in your head that's constantly telling you, I'm late today, I didn't get this finished, I'm grumpy. That voice in your head is always telling us what we could be doing better. But we need that voice in our head to be telling us what we're doing really pretty darn well and what other people see in us. Okay, so this activity, this is also in your handout, is you ask, you can do this with your staff. I think it would be great to do with your staff. You can do this with your students. The directions are to choose and celebrate the words that apply to you. When I do this with students, I only ask them to pick 3 because you know them, they're going to get to a point and they're going to go, I'm not 10 of these things. But what it says is once you've created your list, now rank them. Okay. The idea here is you want to create that feeling that people get when they hear positive feedback. And then if you look at the bottom, this says, what opportunities do you have to flex these strengths? Right? So if you put down that you're a good listener, maybe you put down that you're open-minded, this is where a student specifically could think about, oh, well, maybe there's something I can get involved in at school that will help tap into these traits and these positive feelings. Okay. If you put down hardworking, maybe that's somebody that could be a tutor, right? So we really want to help kids see that, first of all, they have all these wonderful things, inside them or about them, but also that there's ways that we can tap into them. Okay. When I did this with the high school group recently, I said to the students, okay, they shared their three traits. I said, how does that make you feel? And this one girl immediately unmuted and said, awesome. And she said, and I haven't felt awesome in a while. So to me, that was really, really telling of why things like this are so really very important. Okay. Take a minute to look at this quote. I think this is probably one of the most important things that we can help our students achieve, is understanding that what's going on for them right now is not permanent. This is just a short chapter in their long life, and they will be able to in the future reflect back on it, but this is not a permanent situation. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we help students understand that this isn't forever? And I think first and foremost is having them really be in touch with and understand the emotions that they have. We always talk about with social emotional learning is building kids' social emotional vocabulary, right? Having them understand that it's not just black and white, that there's many, many shades of gray. Okay. And so with this activity, we really have students think about what's inside of them, what superpowers do they have to help them thrive? So let's start with the first three letters. Okay. So for S, I want them to say how they feel. I like to have them say it out loud. Now, if you're in a group setting, they may not want to do that, and that's okay. They can write it down. You give out Post-its, you give out little cards, and they write it down. The idea that's important here is that they label it. Okay. And let's say they write down miserable or horrible or something really extreme. Oftentimes, by saying it, by labeling it, you can start to process and ask yourself, is that really how I feel? Am I really miserable? Or maybe I'm frustrated, or I'm bored, or I'm lonely, right? So when you label it, it starts to make you reevaluate, is that really how I feel? Okay. The U, equally, if not more important, is to understand that you have a choice, right? If I say I'm feeling really, really miserable or really, really lonely, understand that there are options or choices that I have. I can reach out to somebody. I can, reach out to a friend that I haven't talked to in a while. I could talk to a parent. I could join some club or activity, even if it is virtual. Okay. So they want to know that they have choices. We all know that when we provide for student choice, it just gives them that agency to feel like they have some control over their lives, right? And then the P has them pick the positive. So it seems like that would be a no-brainer, right? Pick the positive. But why is that important? It's because not every choice is right for every person. And what I mean by that is every decision we make should be aligned to our values. I shouldn't choose joining a club because everybody else is joining this club. If that's not going to change how I feel authentically, then that doesn't make sense for me. Okay, so those first three letters really go together about identifying how I'm feeling and acting on it. The last two letters in these superpowers are really how I can engage with my community and reflect on my experiences. So the idea of engage in empathy. Okay. I think that I'm going to look at what time it is. Okay. We have a few more minutes. This is so critical, especially for the current times that we live in. We need to be able to see the world, not just through our own lens, but through the lens that other people would bring to the table. Okay. We need to constantly, I think, as educators, present students with opportunities to look at and listen to other people's stories, other people's perspectives. Okay. So this is an example of an activity that you can do with your students. I just picked this photo, but I encourage you to use, especially photographs. Visuals are very engaging, but you can use stories from podcasts. You can use news stories where you can bring in a clip. There are student versions of CNN and other news. But the idea is to get kids to think about other people's experiences. So when I do this, I put up the photo and I ask them in chat to add a few questions that come to mind when they look at the photo. Okay. And I got some very interesting comments and questions. Because these are teenagers, most of the questions they had were around that. So they were asking questions like, looking at some of the kids, they were asking questions like, is that all the stuff they have? You know, are they safe? Are they with their parents or are they by themselves? So it's brought up a lot of different issues that are important to teenagers. And then it expanded out and the discussion evolved and really brought up, kids had some very interesting things to say about what it might be like to be in their shoes, right? I would feel so sad or disconnected if I had to leave my friends or my community or my school. So it was very, very interesting. If you pull things from the headlines, I think they're not always easy conversations, but they're important ones. And so I think building empathy is really, you're giving students a gift by helping them build that skill. Okay. And then the idea of resilience. Okay. That R, like I mentioned to you before, this is not permanent. These are the thoughts that kids will often have, the 3 Ps, that it's permanent, that it's personal, and that it's pervasive. So they might think this is never going to get better. I'm so bad at online school. Every part of my life is terrible. And what we try to get them to see is you want to flip that. You want to take those voices in your head and you want to change it to, instead of being permanent, what can I say to myself to demonstrate this is really just temporary? Okay. And as the adults in the room, we're the ones that are going to have to create this for students at first. But then we want them to develop their own little, I don't want to say mantra, but their own little responses to the voices in their head that are telling them this is permanent, this is personal, this is pervasive. We want to build resilience. Okay. Does this make sense? Does this resonate with people? Okay, perfect. Okay. So the way I like to end this, certainly in addition to having any questions that you have, is to really identify if there were specific habits that would help you thrive, that that resonated with you as the trusted adult, and also ones that you would identify that might work with your students. So rather than go to the Padlet, we'll just put it in chat. And then I'm going to share some of these additional resources with you. But anything that resonated with you that you would try for yourself or that you would suggest to try with your students. So just if I could recap a little bit, because you might have forgotten, because we kind of went through it pretty quickly. But there was the, let me go back for you. So we did the superpowers, naming the emotions, engaging in empathy, talking about resilience. We did the strengths. How would you describe your BFF? And then describe yourself. And then if you recall, we also did Who's Got Your Back. So a few strategies that you might try with your staff or try with your students. Okay, if something comes to mind, please don't hesitate to share. And I do want to share these additional resources. All of this is in the handout. I'm going to send you the handout after. Okay, but I wanted teens to have some resources that they could go to that were specifically for them. So I have a YouTube subscription, free subscription, that's workouts for teens by teens to get them moving. A great podcast, it's this one right here called Teenager Therapy. It's a group of 5 students. And what I love about the description is it says, let's see, I can pull it up. It describes them as, I think, 5 stressed, sleep deprived, yet energetic teens sit down and talk about the struggles that come with being a teenager. So I love that this was completely created by teens. Okay, there's some different apps. Actually, one of the teenagers recommended this bottom one to me called 3 Good Things. And now I use it every night. You set it, it sets a little reminder. And whenever you set it, I set mine for 9 p.m. You have to put in 3 things that happened to you today that you consider good things. And then it tracks them across time for you and you can go back and look at them. So I think it's a great way to end your day. And then some more resources around, homework, academic support. These additional apps I meant to mention, when I was talking about mindfulness, you heard me use the word mindfulness. There's not really, I don't really describe each of the strategies to the students as mindfulness, but that's really what they are. They're helping the student to be in the present, or even the staff member to be in the present. So you can see if you go on to Aura or Calm, these are both what I would call meditation apps or mindfulness apps, but they're geared for students. So they have things about sleep because kids' sleep routines have been disrupted, and other kind of dealing with stress, dealing with anxiety. So very helpful resources for students. So that's about all I have for you. Here are some more resources. Again, all of this is in your handout. I would certainly be happy to answer any questions or hear your thoughts about, excuse me, how it's been going in your school, what kinds of things might really support your students. If anybody wants to share. Okay. I'm going to stick a survey in the chat in there. If you wouldn't mind filling that out. I'd love to follow up with people if there were takeaways that you had today, or if there's additional things that you'd like support on, please add that into the chat. It gives you a few simple questions. It's just helpful for us because as we offer these webinars, we want to make sure it taps into what people are really looking for. Okay. And thank you so much for giving up the time today. I appreciate it.